I feel like you probably know the drill by now, but if you don't, here it is. Today is March 11th, 2020, which means it's my 4-year YouTube anniversary, and since apparently I'm only allowed to make videos relating to my hopes for Pokemon games at this time every year, I decided it was a good time to talk about my hopes for the upcoming Pokemon Sword and Shield DLC. This time I more or less decided to tone down the hopes a little bit. I mean, this isn't anything crazy like a new generation, and I don't want to get my hopes up for any game-changing mechanics like what we saw with the wild area in the base games. This is just an add-on after all. With that said, I more or less wanted to use this video to talk about my more minute hopes for the expansion. What smaller issues can they touch on just a bit to make it that much better, and what things can they add to the games? If I remember correctly, the Direct said that the gameplay isn't final, and also a lot of what we saw was concept art, so if I have a hope that doesn't necessarily match what you saw in the trailer, it can still happen. Also, just for clarification, these are opinions and stuff, so yeah, here are my top hopes for the Pokemon Sword and Shield DLC, starting with customization. We already do know that it's going to be back and expanded in the DLC. I more or less am just hoping that the expansion is pretty significant with clothing. There were a lot of clothes in Sword and Shield, don't get me wrong, but I couldn't help but yearn for more options, especially in the hair department. I don't know if maybe I'm just picky, but I have really long hair and there isn't really a design for the male character that fits that bill. The long hair option is just kind of ugly, so I went with a medium and wavy, which fit my character well. I actually did really like it, but if there was maybe something closer to my hairstyle, that'd be nice. Also, I don't know if you remember, but in X and Y, there was this upscale boutique in Lumio City that sold like very expensive clothing. I remember getting a tux for my character in that game, and I was really hoping that they'd have another boutique like that in this game, but hopefully they can bring it back in the DLC. The next hope I have is that they don't focus on gym battles. They hit the nail on the head with the gym battle system in Sword and Shield. It was pretty perfect in my opinion, and that's mostly because of the region of Galar. The puzzles were all unique and fun, and the fights were like the most hype I've ever been during a Pokemon battle. So I mean, if we get more of that, I'm totally okay with it because it's just extra fun, but I kind of want like a Pokemon story unrelated to gym battles, and it kind of looks like that's what we're getting, so yeah. A hope I'm always gonna have is that the game is more difficult. In this case, a good step here would be to simply allow the EXP share to be turned off. If you watched my Pokemon team video, you will understand why this really wasn't a problem for me, but my playstyle is a lot different than others. I still don't get why it's so hard for them to add like a hard mode into these games. They did it once and I really wish they'd do it again. We all know that these DLC packs are both gonna feature entirely different wild area like worlds, which is a prospect I'm very excited about. One thing Sword and Shield lacked though was difficult dungeons. I actually don't think there was any dungeon that was even as difficult as Viridian Forest, and that's not a good look in my opinion. I think that since these new areas are presumably going to be very vast, I really hope there are more dungeons and areas to actually go into and explore. Kind of like the Ruined Watchtower in the wild area, except, you know, actually explorable. Especially with there being new Regiforms in the second DLC pack. I hope we see a callback to Generation 3 so we can get some ridiculously convoluted puzzles like back in the day. But all I'm really asking for is a return to normally formatted dungeons that have some sort of puzzles in them. And while we're talking about the wild area anyway, let's also throw some towns and cities in there. It would be incredibly boring if it was just nature. That might fit in a little bit with the Crown Tundra, but the Isle of Armor, I think we should at the very least see some villages in there. I wouldn't be incentivized to explore if I knew there weren't any places full of NPCs to talk to and activities to do. We obviously see Mustard's dojo and also some towers around in the Isle of Armor, but other than that, it was pretty much just land. I do, however, like that they are having what seems to be different types of biomes in the wild area. In the Direct, it looked like that there were beaches, forests, and who knows what else out there, so that's a nice addition. When we get to the Crown Tundra, it'll be nice to actually see snow on the ground when it's snowing, because that's one thing I hated about the base game wild area. The next hope relates to the legendaries. I want them to be at least a little harder to catch. It seems in later generations, catch rates for some legendary Pokemon have been raised because some are now 45, and in my opinion, all legendary Pokemon should have the same catch rate of 3 like usual. The harder they are to catch, the more it feels like I earned the legendary Pokemon once I finally catch it. I mean, Eternatus had a 100% catch rate, and I get that it was for the story and all, you wouldn't want to get soft lock there, but they could have done something else to make the fight a little more challenging, I think. so making all legendary Pokemon harder to catch is definitely a must. And also, I'm not sure if they'll make any more Galarian legendaries other than the birds, but I do hope they have a good explanation for them. At least in my headcanon, I always thought that there wouldn't be enough legendaries for them to get regional variants, but apparently not, so they could really tap into some old Pokemon lore with this. I mean, this is the universe in which Mega Evolution and Z-moves don't exist, kind of like what Zinnia brought up in the Delta episode. Since they introduced the multiverse in Sun and Moon, they could just say that these birds are from an alternate one or something. Maybe there were multiple Articunos, Zapdoses, and Moltres that lived separately for millions of years and lost their original flying types. I personally think that Articuno will be Ice Psychic, Zapdos will be Fighting and Electric, and Moltres will be Dark Fire, but that's just me. One of the bigger wishes that I have is that the game has an actual story. It's got a lot going for it too. The new characters for starters are pretty great in my opinion. I'm excited to train in a different type of setting with Mustard and Kubfu. Apparently from what I've heard, Kubfu's evolutions aren't version exclusive and instead are decided based on in-game decisions, which is super cool in my opinion. Also, Avery and Clara look like they'll be welcome additions too. But yeah, the story looks like it'll be different than usual, to say the least. Which actually brings me to my biggest hope that I have for the DLC, which is that we are something other than a gym challenger. This kind of ties in with my earlier hope, but I'm sick of each game ending with me becoming the champion. I really want to become something other than your regular old Pokemon trainer, and this actually ties in with a hope I've had since the good old days of Pokemon Sun and Moon, which is just that. I hope we're not specifically a gym challenger. I want to do other stuff, you know? I've always imagined one day there being a Pokemon game that is like the anime, and Sword and Shield has brought me even closer to that dream. But if I was actually a Pokemon trainer myself, I would want to do other stuff. The DLC can be the segue into my dream of a Pokemon RPG like no other, in that you could truly be different classes. If I want to be a Pokemon performer, then so be it. Maybe I want to be a Pokemon trainer, but not in the same vein as the usual one. There are so many possibilities that I think this DLC is going to bring us into, but this is my main hope, and man do I hope it pays off because that would be awesome. But yeah, those are a few of my hopes for the Sword and Shield DLC. I feel like these weren't too unreasonable of me to ask for, especially since these technically aren't brand new games. I'm genuinely excited for these additions to the franchise, and the wait isn't that long now. In about 3 months' time, we'll be playing the Isle of Armor, and I'm shaking with excitement. But anyway, what are your hopes for the Sword and Shield DLC? I've sat here and talked about it for a bit, so now it's your turn to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, like and subscribe and all that. I'm super close to 1,000 subscribers, and I would love to get there by the end of March. Also, I have a super big video planned for a couple weeks from now, and another video planned for when I hit 1,000 subscribers. So if you want to see those, definitely subscribe. Also, another thing you can tell me in the comments is what Pokemon do you specifically want to see return in Sword and Shield? From what I've heard, Zorua and Zoroark are back, so I'm content for now, but there are some other Pokemon that I definitely want in, which actually sounds like a good video to make, so I guess I'm gonna go attempt to write that. So with all of that out of the way, my name is Shiny Zoroark, and I bid you adieu.